Good afternoon, everyone. This is Dr. Shomasri Rai Chaudhuri, Associate Professor of Economics, Lady Brabourne College, chairing this session. The rules of the paper presenter, that is 5 minutes time is allotted for each paper presenter, and questions will be encouraged if their time permits. That means within 2:30 to 3 o'clock, 6 of you people are going to present your paper. First paper presenter name is Preeti V, Research Scholar, Department English, Avinash Lingam, Institute of Home Science and Higher Education for Women, Coimbatore. V. Preeti, it is your time now.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for my introduction. And shall I start now?
Yeah, start.
Okay, let me share the screen.
Yeah, sure.
So for today, I have chosen the topic Needs to be Heard Portrayal of Widows in Mona Verma's Lost and Found in Banaras. So first of all, I have to thank the organizing committee for giving me the opportunity to talk on this particular topic. The novel Lost and Found in Banaras, actually it is a wonderful novel which is written by Mona Verma. She has been activist throughout her career. Mona Verma is born in Haridwar on the year 1970. She is an award-winning author of 12 works of fictions, and she has more interest to bring out the possibilities of the problems regarding women issues and particularly on widows. So the aim of the paper is, so before moving on to the aim of the paper, let me tell some meaning of few words, the common terms to be mentioned for widows. So for a widow in India, we used to call as vidwa, which means it comes from the Sanskrit word vid, which means be destitute. So the state of being a widow is termed as widowhood. So generally widows are considered to be a marginalized group in India because they occupy a very low social status in society. Consequently, they have to face establishment of new relations within the family, within the kin group, and within the community. If such new relationships appear difficult to emerge, widows often have to take refuge in charitable houses or ashrams and stay away from their families. The historically bore out perceptions of widows is that they are inauspicious dependents on society, despite their rights in law, which are rarely exercised in practice. As we all know that widows are enduring a critical life in some historical places like Varanasi, Banaras and all. So in this paper, the paper tries to throw light on the harassing miseries and hardships faced by widows in India, and especially in the city Varanasi, with reference to the novel Lost and Found in Banaras. This paper aims at bringing the issues in the limelight to improve the livelihood of ostracized widows. So the objective of the paper is to elicit the in-depth study of the condition of widows in the male-centric society, to explore the challenges and difficulties of widows as depicted in Mona Verma's Lost and Found in Banaras, and to evoke an idea of gender equality in the reader's mind in order to empower women, especially widows. So then the consequences. A woman after widowed faces several consequences. We all know that. The widowhood state carries psychological, social, and emotional repercussions for the widowed women. The term of addressing her changes from she to it once she become a widow. So mourning rituals add on to the emotional stress and are a repeated reminder of the death of the husband. A widow is expected to live a life of severe austerity, and she also has to avoid all the pleasurable things in her life.
Time is over, Preeti. Please fast and finish.
Yes, ma'am. A widow's food pattern has to be changed, and she is to ingest simple meals devoid of any spices due to the belief that intake of spices exacerbates sexual desires. Even in many households, widowed women either have their own separate arrangement for cooking food or prepare food for themselves after the food has been prepared for the family. In many parts of the country, shaving the head of the widow is a common practice, and it is still in practice in India. All these measures are aimed towards desexualizing the woman so that she becomes unappealing to the many prying eyes of near and far male relatives. So moving on to the next slide. So now we have come to the novel. Through her novel Lost and Found in Banaras, Mona Verma explores the predicament and dismal condition of such forlorn widows. Verma dexterously depicts the callousness of the society, which robs the childhood of protagonist Brinda, who gets married at the age of 3. She is designated to be a wife when she lacks the maturity to accept and realize what marriage signifies and connotes.
Your time is over, Preeti. Is it over?
Yeah, ma'am, can you please give me 1 more minute so that I can finish it?
Okay, just 1 more minute. Yeah.
Yes. So in this novel, the protagonist Brinda is the child wife. After once she's married, within a few hours, her husband has passed away. So after that, she has been moved into a dilapidated ashram for widows, where she is doomed to lead a life of abstinence and subjected to solitary confinement in the ashram for the rest of her life. But at the same time, her husband, who was thought to be dead, was come alive. And after that, after 20 years, he has come alive. But her state, but her state is. She confined herself to the uncomfortable, angry, and silent space, and possesses the firmness to extend that space. And after that, she states to her husband calmly with a smile that she wants to live a life like a widow, because throughout her life she was a widow. And after this incident too, she wants to be a widow, and she wants to change the lives of all widows who has been abandoned and who are to seek sanctuary in Banaras.
Sorry, it's already 3 times.
Okay, ma'am.
Already 3 minutes more I have given.
Okay.
Sorry, Preeti.
Okay.
Next participant. Thank you, Preeti.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Somdakta Chattopadhyay.
Yes, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible. Research scholar, counseling psychology is the department, Yorkville University. Yes, carry on. Somdakta, your topic.
I'll be presenting on Black, the story of Michelle, an unconventional trajectory. The film begins with Michelle McNally, a 40-year-old woman with visual and auditory impairments, reuniting with her long-lost mentor, Devraj Sahai, by a stroke of destiny. The sequence then rewinds to her childhood days, leaving the audience to witness the roller coaster of Michelle's life. Despite her accomplishments, she finds herself unable to reconcile with feelings of isolation and loneliness, and pines for love and companionship. In the course of the film, she is seen taking a courageous stance while attempting an exploration of her sexual identity, which, though eventually stifled by societal constrictions, serves a greater purpose of dispelling myths around disability and sexuality. The plot is replete with evidences wherein society, with its array of patriarchal limitations, strategically robs a woman of her agency to exercise free choice, either by coercing her into an undesired coupledom or completely nullifying her desires for conjugation. In this paper, I will attempt to delve into Michelle's internal fantasy world and her desperate attempts to communicate with a world that doesn't quite lend a listening ear. We will further try and see through the follies of patriarchy in her circumstances that serve to corrode her sense of self-worth, in turn barring her from seeking fulfillment in all spheres of life. In Michelle's story, her teacher attempts to inculcate a measure of societal ideals into her persona. His methods, though, are considerably regressive, devoid of much empathetic or experientially shared processes, but inclined towards a rigid, authoritarian, and imposing approach, what Ernest Jones called God complex, as he claims to be the magician in Michelle's life. Michelle, on the other hand, grows up to be a woman having a mind of her own, willing to take charge and live a life of dignity and independence, backed by knowledge, wisdom, and skill. Despite her struggles, she retains a striking sense of humor, and her zest for life is contagious. Owing to the severely patriarchal nature of its origin, our world builds on a rather rigid matrix, sans much regard for individual differences. The opening monologue conveys a deep sense of seclusion from the world around that brings forth the agony of being unheard, unseen. ये मेरी दुनिया है, यहाँ कुछ दिखाई नहीं देता, कुछ सुनाई नहीं देता. In the words of an inspirational scholar working in the domain of disability, the internalization that one carries in an Indian culture accustoms them to seeing their disability as a personal quest and tragedy to be borne alone. The stereotype depiction of women characters in our traditional folklores and literature also has a major contribution in victimizing women, as they tend to reinforce problematic gender stereotypes, subjugating them to perpetually assume a depressive position of passive endurance and self-sacrifice. They're socially and culturally conditioned to repudiate active claims to pleasure, while imbibing maternal qualities of care, nurturance, and generosity, along with a disavowal of assertive and aggressive impulses. Women like Michelle are therefore forced to contend with society's ambivalent responses to the nature of their challenges, alternating between contemptuous remarks or gazes and overly altruistic approaches. It is evident from an ensuing dialogue that Michelle's sister Sarah becomes the unconscious bearer of a patriarchal mindset. I know this could upset you. You may be feeling that you'll never fall in love. I hope you will, I really do. But until then, please don't spoil my evening. She rather crossly points out Michelle's assumed inability to sustain a mutually reciprocal conjugal relationship with an intimate romantic partner, implicating a forced lifelong singledom. Here, in turn, lies the success of patriarchy in purposefully desexualizing a woman with a difference, while cyclically contributing to the subsequent erosion of intrafamilial bonds of friendship. Michelle yearns a secure attachment with a partner who would be in a position to provide some sort of containment for her intrapsychic conflicts, desires, as well as the weight of a stigmatized existence that is often too overwhelming to bear alone. Mr. Sahai brashly reinforces a long-held societal myth when he tells Michelle that she wouldn't ever in life be entitled to sexual love on account of her disability. In doing so, he unwittingly remarginalizes her existence as part of a community. Mr. Sahai unconsciously enacts his repressed power motive while responding to Michelle's sexual advances in a manner as though he was doing her a favor that nobody else would. The narrative leaves us with a lurking sense of despair at the undue glorification of self-denying attributes in women, even after having to prove themselves on multiple fronts. Michelle is forced to strike a compromise in the end by completely negating her personal needs for pleasure, comfort, and emotional containment, despite strong endeavors on her part to outgrow the burden of societal impositions, to rightfully claim an experience of romantic love and physical intimacy, wanting to live life on her own terms. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjukta. Next presenter, Dr. Anjan Shah from Maulana Azad College. Are you here? Department.
Yes, ma'am, I am here.
Please start your presentation.
Well, Honorable Chairperson and my fellow participants, my paper is entitled Should Marital Rape Be Criminalized in India? Some observations.
If he is not here, you can move on to the next speaker. And after the points, you can present his paper.
No, Anjan is very much here. He's presenting now.
Okay.
Carry on, Dr. Anjan Shah.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. As the time is too short.
Yes, only 5 minutes.
Only 5 minutes. So I have discussed the issue of marital rape in the light of some recent judicial pronouncements discussing pros and cons of criminalizing it as such, and also discussing in the process how this, once considered to be a legal oxymoron as such, later on came to be accepted. With this short introduction, I would be reading out my paper. The marital rape concept had never been recognized in history, as there had been no formal recognition of a woman as a separate legal entity. As soon as the man and the woman were married, they were recognized as a single entity of a man, and sexual violence in marriage has a history as long as the institution of marriage itself. But for the millennia, marital rape, like the other forms of sexual assault, was considered to be a private trouble and not a public issue. Early rape laws, interestingly, defined the assault as a property crime against the husband or father whose wife or daughter had been violated. Under this intellectual framework, marital rape was an oxymoron, since a wife was legally considered to be a husband's sexual property or chattel. The blatant power of patriarchy had resulted into the belief that woman was a part of the life of the husband and she was represented and defined by him. But the society didn't consider the importance of her independence, even in the situation of the contingencies. The wife was objectified to be a property of the husband, and so any hindrance to the enjoyment of the property would be considered as theft or violence against the property owner. Marital rape, as is obvious, is rape by the husband upon his wife, and exception 2 of section 375 of the Indian Penal Code lays down that the husband cannot be accused of committing a rape with his legally wedded wife if she is above the age of 18 years. The marital rape exception is arguably based on the mutual matrimonial contract, which denies a wife the right to retract her marital consent to engage in sexual intercourse with her husband. The argument of, quote, irrevocable marital consent, unquote, has genesis in the statement of celebrated British jurist Sir Matthew Hale, who said, within quote, but the husband cannot be guilty of rape committed by himself upon his lawful wife. For by their mutual matrimonial consent and contract, the wife hath given up herself in this kind unto her husband, which she cannot retract. Thomas Babington Macaulay seems to be influenced by Hale's principle, and exception 2 of section 375 as it was enacted in the 1860 read as, quote, sexual intercourse by a man with his wife, the wife not being under 10 years of age, is not rape. And the age limit has subsequently been raised with passage of legislations. And now with the passing of Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act, or POCSO, 2012, the age is de facto increased to 18 years. To clarify the position, the Supreme Court of India in the case of Independent Thought versus Union of India in 2017 read down exception to section 375 IPC to bring it in consonance with the Constitution of India as well as POCSO. It is not the case that the marital rape is remediless. The dissatisfaction with the present state of law is that it doesn't penalize it adequately so as to bring it at par with the general offense of rape. Rape of a wife below the age of 18 years or during the judicial separation already amounts to rape. The prosecution for the offense of outraging the modesty of women using criminal force, causing hurt or grievous hurt, can still be launched against the accused husband. Furthermore, the wife can also seek divorce on the grounds of cruelty under the relevant marriage law. Thus, when one argues about the criminalization of marital rape, then what is actually meant is a separate penal provision for such act should be incorporated in the law. A separate provision.
Anjan, it is already 5 minutes. Will you just finish?
Okay, ma'am.
You just
okay, I would read
wrap
out
up
the
your presentation.
concluding portion. And
Yes.
And based on some policy considerations and definition of marital rape as given by Justice J.B. Padriola of Gujarat High Court In Nimeshbhai Desai versus State of Gujarat, it is suggested that forced sex, non-consensual, unnatural offenses, and so forth can easily be criminalized. And but there would be few cases where the general pattern of deteriorating relationship absent, and the allegation is solely based on non-consensual sexual act. But how much latitude we would allow the society or the legal framework into an intimate, private affair is to be determined. Thank you.
Thank you, Anjan. Next presenter, Mrs. Shayantari Ukil, Assistant Professor, English, Heritage Law College.
Thank you, ma'am. May I begin?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Your topic?
The thunder in her story, psychological deviance, female creativity, and the semiotics of redemption. Throughout the ages, it has been found that women have been negotiating with the notion of otherness in gendered, patriarchal culture and subjected to restricted socioeconomic conditions of existence. And as a result, they often suffer from imbalanced mental health conditions. The female consciousness, as revealed in textuality, is traumatized by the essentially limited space that she is forced to inhabit in a patriarchal society, and in consequence assumes the self of the insane and attempts to convert the trauma into a powerful and self-explanatory language, which is replete with deeper signifiers regarding her suffocated existence, and aims at a certain kind of redemption from the above-mentioned trauma. It is this particular kind of linguistic impulse of the so-called insane woman that is the chief area of concern in this paper. Let us examine some utterances made by so-called insane protagonists who reflect the crisis of the female existence and its obvious effect on the female psyche as expressed through textuality. In White Sargasso by Jean Rees, where we find the gradual descent of the vibrant young girl Atwane into a raving lunatic who is kept under strict control throughout her life, and Atwane lives and suffers in silence, gathering insight of her hopeless situation from what she can only hear in faint whispers from other people who live near her, and as a protest against the isolation which is forcefully clamped upon her, Jean Rees confers a linguistic empowerment to delineate Atwane's predicament to the reader in her own words. Thus, in one of the most powerful portions of the novel, where the dreams of fire haunt Batha or Atwane, she says, "But I looked at the dress on the floor, and it was as if the fire had spread across the room. It was beautiful, and it reminded me of something I must do. I'll remember, I thought. And once again, I quote, as soon as I turned the key, I saw it hanging the color of fire and sunset, the color of flamboyant flowers." This may appear to be the ravings of a mad woman, but the lexical arrangement suggests a redemption, the kind of redemption that in the end is visualized by all suffering women who, like Atwane, are doomed to a life of existential crisis due to the eccentric whims and demands of patriarchy. In another seminal text on a similar theme, The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman, the eye narrator in the novel finds herself caught in a state of postpartum depression with a classic resemblance to a condition mentioned by Phyllis Chester in her book Women and Madness, where she writes that one of the common causes of madness is, I quote, subjection of the wife to the husband's will, unquote. Her therapy consists of, I quote, imprisonment and domestic servitude, unquote. Thus, the narrator is confined, and in the state of confinement, finds companionship in the yellow wallpaper of her room when she discovers the pattern of multiple women like her, who, according to her, is creeping and crawling and desperately trying to move beyond the frustrating structures of female existence. She says, and I quote, and she's all the time trying to climb through, but nobody could climb through that pattern. It strangles so. I think it has so many heads. Thus, unquote, thus she takes recluse in a world of fantasy and weaves a tale of salvation for the tortured soul through the nascence of a new linguistic symbolism, composite of the wallpaper, which suggests patriarchal dominance, and the creeping women who suggest circumvention from the same. A similar linguistic semiotics is employed by Sylvia Plath in her novel, The Bell Jar, where the heroine, Esther Greenwood, finds herself suspended within a bell jar, which entraps her in a state of nothingness and restricts the process of her self-actualization in the limited world that she inhabits. Esther thus expresses her exasperation and bitterness in a language which is replete with a distinctive symbolism. I quote, "To the person in the bell jar, blank and stopped as a dead baby, the world itself is a bad dream." And then again, I quote, "Death must be so beautiful, to forget time, to forgive life, to be at peace," unquote. Here, once again, death, a negative incident, is transformed into a positive narrative visual. 1 minute more. Through a strong and evocative linguistic power play, so that it becomes a beacon of release, rupture, and deliverance. An overview of the use of language in the few instances mentioned above reminds us of the plays by Brian Frill, which deal with the interplay of language, identity, and communication. And to conclude, one is reminded of an age-old Mexican proverb about the feminist movement, which goes thus: "They tried to bury us, they did not know we were the seeds." The multidimensional symbolism behind the facade of female insanity and textuality is actually emblematic of a neo-creativity which arises from the ashes of repression to ingress into an advanced domain of artistic creation. The phenomenon of psychological deviance thus transcends its social, legal, and clinical connotations to embrace broader cultural and political horizons, and in the end becomes an important signifier of feminist aesthetic experience, the triumphant celebration of the overburdened feminine psyche in pursuit of new models of artistic expression, in order to activate the dynamics of an intensive communication system empowered to provide comprehensive articulation of the female experience in textual representation of reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Shantani. Next presenter was Antara Patro, independent research scholar, English literature and language. Antara.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for introducing me. My topic today is caste-based sexual violence media's role in Dalit women's exploitation. The caste system or Varna system is the present reality that is deeply rooted in Indian society. We cannot deny the oppression based on caste over marginalized communities by the upper castes and its particular impact on Dalit women. In the caste system, the position of women is even lower than the four Varnas. The system is closely linked to the concept of purity. The caste system considers Dalits as the impure. Because of stereotypes around impurity, they are seen as untouchables and excluded from the mainstream society. Dalit women are further oppressed among the Dalit community, which leaves no place for them in society. Where tradition dries up women like a decadent tree, where they have to spend their whole life, where they have to live under the black shadow of someone else. In such a country, women are still slaves. It is a crime to be born a woman. It is a crime to be born a woman. The above piece of the poem, written by famous Marathi Dalit poet Hira Vansore, truly uncovers the trouble faced by women in India. Her poem not only articulates the standpoint of the women in India, but the standpoint of Dalit women who are at the bottom of the caste gender ladder. The poem presents the social paradigm and reiterates the inescapable nature of exploitation and sexual violence women face in India. Indian women are categorized and identified with their caste even before their gender. They are Dalit women, Maratha women, Brahmin women, which invariably makes it a reason for the exploitation which is different for different women. Dalit women are seen as belonging outside the normative structure of caste purity and hence sexual purity. The caste system sanctions the upper caste men's access to Dalit women's sexuality, body and labor. Caste-based sexual violence against Dalit women is condoned and considered normal. While the fight of Babari Devi, an oppressed caste woman, resulted in the formation of the Sexual Harassment at Workplace Act 2013, incidents like what happened in Khairlanji, Unnao and Hatrash make it clear that the Dalit women working in the agricultural fields or construction sites never get protection under the Act. In December 2012, gang rape case news coverage was on various platforms gave more time and space as compared to any other rape case that happened in the history of independent India. The ferocious incident horrified the nation. During the days of the protest in 2012, anti-caste scholars repeatedly questioned the lack of similar response for the general public against the Khairlanji atrocity. This case shows us the remarkable difference between outrage against violence on Dalit women violence and violence against upper caste women. It took more than a week for the national media to publish the news of the Khairlanji atrocity and more than 2 weeks to report the Hathras atrocity. For this, it is evident that the Indian mainstream media often ignores stories about women belonging to marginalized communities. Crime against Dalits see a rise of 10 to 20% every year. In a just society, the media's space to violence against Dalits should have correspondingly increased too. But has that happened? No. Just like in a society where we have rigid caste-based dominant hierarchies, the actions of the media and journalists too are based on the caste hierarchies. We are told that media is the fourth pillar of democracy, but media itself is also under the pressure of these caste hierarchies, and this gets reflected in the media coverages. On 29 September 2006, a mob of dominant caste men and women attacked a Dalit woman, Surekha Votmange, and her 3 children in Maharashtra's Khairlanji village. They were forced out of their house and they had to parade naked. Burnt charcoal were pushed through their private parts. Their dead bodies were dumped at the outskirts of the village. The participation of caste Hindu women in the rape and lynching of a Dalit woman and her children shocks the very foundations of human conscience. However, such a gruesome incident did not shock the nation. In the case of Khairlanji, the media reported that Surekha had an extramarital affair with her cousin, which was presented as the justification of the atrocity. According to...
Please try to wrap up.
Yes, ma'am, I'm close to the conclusion. We, the people of India, means it includes different identities existing in the society. Using the term people for every person in this country is a very powerful term to articulate each individual's equal existence in society, as opposed to differentiations based on caste, class, and gender, or putting people into a frame of male-female binaries. Constitutional values say that every person has the right to survive with dignity. It means fundamental rights like the right to live, right to equality, right to freedom, right to safety, etc. But these rights are yet to reach the Dalit population of this country. Thank you, respected chairperson, for giving me the opportunity to speak. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, paper presenter, for keeping the time, as well as you people have taken the various varied subjects, and you presented very well. Thank you once again. Now over to Mona Lisa for our next session. Mona Lisa.
We are now at the second round of paper presentations for today. Our chair for this session of paper presentations is Srimati Ruby Pal, Department of Economics, Lady Brabourne College. Over to you, Ruby Di.
Thank you, Mona Lisa. Shall we start right now?
I think we could, Ruby Di, because this is a long session and everyone is here. So I suppose we could, because the speaker has...
Okay. Then let me see whether all the participants of this paper presentation session are present or not. Sadaf Mushtaq Nasti, Meenakshi Kulkarni, Prarthana Agarwal Goel, Otoshi Mahapatra, Shilpa Joy, Shushmita Goswami. If all of you are present, we can start now. Now it is stated that human development is endangered if it is not engendered. Welcome to this paper presentation session. Now, please note that since we have a time constraint, stick to 5 minutes for each presentation. Okay? And questions may be taken at the end, but that too if time permits. So let's start. We begin with Sadaf Mushtaq Nasti, a research scholar in English, DAVV Indo. Are you there, Sadaf? Sadaf Mushtaq Nasti, are you there? I think this participant is not present, so we can move on to Meenakshi. Meenakshi Kulkarni, are you present?
Yes, ma'am, I'm here.
So, will you please start?
Yes,
And
ma'am.
stick to 5 minutes, okay?
Okay.
Meenakshi
Thank you.
Kulkarni, Assistant Professor of English, LAD and Srimati RP College for Women. Over to you, Meenakshi.
Thank you so much, madam. Good afternoon. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to present the paper, but I have been given only 5 minutes. I'll be presenting on struggle and emerging identity of women in Ashapurna Devi's first promise. Ashapurna Devi, a prominent Bengali novelist, was born in 1909 in the British-controlled India. Her writings dedicated on the gender discrimination and the emergence and progress of middle-class Bengali women, their subjugation, position, realization and consciousness, motivations, and for their voice to be heard. She touches how the women of a generation were imperiled to and differently retorted to the patriarchal structure and disclose that some would comply while the others would break free the four walls. Her fictions trace the evolution of the Bengali women as an open-minded and empowered individual harassed against the shackles of discriminatory standards imposed upon her by prevalent society. She touches the extremely conservative upbringing that the female members of her generations were subjected to, and goes on to show how different individuals responded to these structures in different ways. Some would comply unquestioningly, some would comply simply because they did not dare to protest, while the others would break free and find their own niche in the outside world. This work tries to analyze Ashapurna Devi's as a feminist through a critical evaluation of a much discussed, much acclaimed, and widely read magnum opus Pratham Pratishuti, the first promise. Ashapurna narrates the story of the struggles and efforts of women in 19th century colonial Bengal in a deceptively essay and conversational, easy and conversational style. The attractive 8-year-old heroine Satyabati is a child bride who leaves her husband's village for Calcutta in the capital of British rule India, where she finds herself in the social dynamics of women's education, social reform agendas, modern medicine, and urban entertainment. As she makes her way through this intricate maze, trying to understand the rapidly changing world around her, the protagonist nurtures hopes and aspirations for her daughter. She empowers herself by breaking free from her inherited world and goes out in search, where she lands into the heart of tradition. She traces how the female members of a generation were subjected to and differently responded to the patriarchal structures, and showed that some would comply while the others would break free the four walls. Pertaining to this, in this paper, I've tried to visualize Ashapurna Devi as a feminist through a critical evaluation of the much discussed magnum opus. Yes, ma'am, were you saying something?
No, you carry on.
Yes, yes.
2 minutes left.
Then should I conclude, ma'am, if I have, because I will not be able to do the rationale and the objectives also. At least I'll say, say the objectives. The objectives of the paper is to analyze the staunch character of the novel, to view the extent of their contemporariness and their conversational nature, to perceive how the social situation fettered the women, to reckon Ashapurna Devi as a feminist in this inspiring work, and through the character of Satyabati, she showed how the tomboy from the childhood, Satya was rebellious and fearless since childhood, and she couldn't stand the contradictory nature of man, and she didn't understand the whole woman community. When a girl, even after beaten up by her husband, fondles him, she doesn't understand why a girl would be abused so badly for just not being so efficient in the household works. Satya was a quick, touch to quick girl. She can't bear else's pain, especially if that's for a girl who is reprimanded in her in-laws. And that's why she doesn't accept the fact when her sister-in-law is asked to keep a ritual for her husband's co-wife. She protested with her best when her cousin brother says that a girl should never be educated, else she'll become blind. Satya replied with a challenging voice that these are all baseless pseudo-facts made to dominate the women. In addition, when her father said a girl is not needed to be educated, she counteracted saying if a girl is not needed to do anything, why they are needed to born? Satya started studying in the when she was motivated by her father, and she becomes intelligent and she can write verse, read the epics, and as we have seen, once she got to Kolkata, she started studying English as well. Because
Sorry, Meenakshi, would you please stop?
Can I conclude, ma'am?
Okay, sure.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. In conclusion, I would just add, she believed that all the protests and revolutions start from home, and hence she acknowledged the title Kitchen Writer. The novel was indeed a cutting edge one, as it criticized all aspects of the social life, not only the situation of women, but also the social situation, the colonial life. It covered all the sections. However, for me, Ashapurna Devi could not come out of the fact that a family life, it is obvious to the woman. She could make Suhas, daughter of Satya's sister-in-law, Shankari, independent but not married. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you, Meenakshi. Next speaker is Prarthana Agarwal Goel.
Yeah.
Please start.
Yeah. Thank you so much, ma'am. And
Prarthana is Assistant Professor of Economics, Guru Gobind Singh, Indraprastha University.
Yeah.
Over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, ma'am, and thank you so much all the organizers for organizing this amazing workshop and giving me the opportunity to present today. So I am from from slightly different field from economics, but I'm thoroughly enjoying all the aspects and the deliberations from the literary side. I would quickly share my presentation, and I hope I would be able to bring a different side on the title. So just give me 1 second. I will just present my work.
But stick to 5 minutes, okay?
Yes, sure, ma'am, sure. So I hope, is my presentation visible?
It's coming, yes.
Okay, yeah. Thank you so much. So today I'm going to present a work that we have done. This is on COVID-19 and its impact on gender equality. So before we start with discussing the results of the work, I would first like to point out towards the women's socioeconomic status in India. So if you look at the graph, the blue line and the yellow line, these basically represent the women workforce participation. So the blue line is the urban female participation, and the yellow line is the female participation in the rural areas. And the red and the green lines are the male participations. So what we see is that not only is there a huge divide in the workforce participation between males and females, however, for the urban females, the participation rate is even lower. If we look at the literacy rate trends, the literacy rate, the orange bars for females has consistently been lower as compared to men, though there has been an increase, but the gap has always existed. So there are some parameters that reflect the socioeconomic status of females, and that could be looked into the sex ratio. So the dark line is basically the sex ratio, overall sex ratio, which is number of females per 1,000 males. And what we are seeing is that it has constantly been dropping. This is the child sex ratio that has constantly been dropping. The pink line is basically the overall sex ratio, though there has been a slight improvement in that. However, we only have 914 female children as compared to 1,000 males. And all these things, these have translated to one of the, it affects a lot of parameters in the economy, but another important aspect is the crime and the violence against women. Over the years, the crime, the reported violence has gone up, and in the year of 2012, there have been approximately 250,000 cases of violence reported against women. So what are the reasons behind this? One reason that could be thought of is the poor socioeconomic status of women. And why is it so? Because of the low economic values of females as compared to males. So females are mostly involved in care activities and unproductive activities that take place at the home, and therefore their economic value is low. The daughters are considered to be a liability and sons are considered as assets. Daughters are considered to be liabilities in terms of dowry payments, marriage expenses, and also because in events of crime, daughters are the one who needs to be taken care of, and sons are considered as assets who provide protection both financially and physically. And because of these reasons, there are higher incidences of crime against women in form of there are sex selective abortions, and that is one reason why the sex ratio is seen to be so low in India. There's poor human capital investment in daughters in terms of health and education, and therefore they are also subject to oppression and exploitation. And because of all these factors, again, the socioeconomic status of females is poor. So this leads to a vicious circle where females are constantly in a poor status in the economy, and therefore they remain at the edge and at the marginalized. So what happens, we did a study for the times of COVID and the lockdown due to COVID-19. So what we found was that in the month of April, when there was the lockdown, the crime against women had significantly reduced. So 2019, in the months of January, February, March, as compared to 2019, in the month of April, the crime has significantly reduced for women. And this is one paper that I've written with my co-authors Joyita Roy Chaudhary and Yashobanta Parida, and it's been recently published in the International Journal of Interdisciplinary Economics, a SAGE journal. And the reasons why the phenomena that would explain this fall in crime against women could be, one is the opportunity effect. Because of the lockdown, the mobility restrictions, women were not moving out of the household. So the opportunity effect of crime says that a crime would be able to take place if both the victims and the perpetrators, they meet at a particular point in time. So during COVID-19, because females were not moving out of their household, so it reduced the opportunity effect to commit crime. If we look at the different categories of crime, the blue line is basically during, pre-lockdown periods, and the orange lines are during April, which is the lockdown. It is only domestic violence and cyber crime against women that had gone up during the lockdown. However, before the lockdown, all other crimes were higher. And the reason for domestic violence being higher was higher strain and stress that was experienced by both the men and the women in the household, because there was a lot of loss of employment, there was a lot of financial stress, and there was a lot of psychological stress, which was leading to high domestic violence. And then again, women were subject to a lot of cybercrime because of the lack of information or the knowledge in order to prevent themselves from cybercrime, etc. So I'm not going to go into a lot of details of the model because of the constraint in time, but these were one of the main results that we deduced and the theories that we had derived to explain the results. So what is a discussion and a way forward? So what we see is that during COVID, the crime against women had fallen because of the reduced opportunity effect. Females were not moving out of the household, but that does not, we cannot conclude that to reduce crime against women, it is important that females be constrained and restricted within the household. What is important is that we need to improve women representation in the labor market so that their social economic status could be improved. However, there has to be stricter labor laws for the females. There should be policies to minimize male-female wage gap. There should be a promotion of the industries that are more female intensive. And again, since I just said that lockdown had constrained crime against women, but what we need is that we need more an increase in the women police stations, better female political representation, and stricter laws for crime against women to make sure that the work environment and the environment outside the household is safe for women. Then again, the Domestic Violence Act of 2005 is in place. However, there are still a lot of incidences. Hence, it is important that the implementation of this act may be more stringent. And obviously, above all, what is required is to strengthen women participation. So, the discussion.
Please conclude.
Yes, ma'am. I'm on the conclusion. So the ideal situation here is that all the women, the socioeconomic status of women needs to be improved, and the environment needs to be made safer if we would want to bring a structural change in crime, in reducing crime against women. So I would conclude with my presentation here, and thank you so much. I can take questions whenever the organizers allow.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Prarthana. Next speaker, next speaker is Atoshi Mahapatra. Atoshi, Assistant Professor of Philosophy, Shohid Matangini Hazra Government General Degree College for Women. Atoshi, are you there? I think I saw Atoshi Mahapatra's name here. Atoshi.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, you please take over. You start your presentation.
Thank you, ma'am. The title of my paper.
Maintain time, okay?
Okay, ma'am. Thank you. Honorable Chairperson and fellow participant. The title of my paper is Status and Position of Women in Ancient India. In this paper, I try to discuss during the period of Indus Valley Civilization, early and later Vedic period, epic period, as well as period of Dharma Shastra and Purana. In the Indus Valley Civilization, the evidence of female clay figurines to highlight the social cultural role of women in that society. The hairstyle, ornaments, dressing clearly indicate that the important prominence assigned to women at the time in what appeared to be a near egalitarian society. Additionally, the bronze dancing girl figurines suggest the specific public activities played in women at that time. Of extreme interest is also the occurrence of specific naturalistic goddess and the priest, which suggests that Indus people worshipped goddess whose domain was the forest. Women in early Vedic period. In early Vedic period, the condition of Vedic women was good. Women of Kshatriya caste received the material art coaching and arms training. The plethora of goddess in ancient period created the instinct respect of women. Ardhanarishwar was highly worshipped. The Hindu considered that man and woman represent two aspects of one person. It is called Ardhanarishwar. Woman was considered more powerful than men, treated as goddess as of Shakti. The Shakta Hindu considered the mother goddess to be supreme creator. In Vedic society, women are participated in religious ceremony and tribal assemblies. In the spiritual field, a wife enjoys the full rights and regularly participated in religious ceremony with her husband. Women enjoyed marriage as well as domestic life. Widow could remarry and child marriage was unknown. Women choose their husband through a type of marriage is called Swayamvar, or live-in relationship is called Gandharva marriage. Women in early Vedic period. Women in later Vedic period. In the later Vedic period, the position of women gradually deteriorated. As the time passed, the position of women underwent changes in the all sphere of life. The status of women fell in the later Vedic and epic period. In the period of later Vedic period, the women lost their political rights of attending assembly. Child marriage came into existence. According to Aitareya Brahmana, the daughter has been described as a source of misery. Women in epic period. The women of epic period in the ancient India enjoy a honorable position at home. Both Ramayana and Mahabharata had given a respectable place for women. Women had been called root cause of ahimsa, as well as cause of dharma, prosperity, and enjoyment in both ethics. We find the vast reference of the expression of courage, strong willpower, and valor of women like Sita, Savitri, Draupadi, and others. Women in Dharmasastra and Purana. During the period of Dharmasastra and Purana, the status of women gradually declined and underwent a major change. During the period of Siti, women were bracketed with the Sudra and were denied the right of the study of the Veda, to utter Vedic mantra and to perform Vedic rites. Marriage or domestic life became compulsory for women, and unquestioning devotion to husband is their only duty. The girls were deprived of formal education. Daughters were regarded as a second-class citizen. She lost independence and became lifelong dependent on male-dominated society. Due to various restrictions imposed on the freedom of women, some problems started creeping in. In social field, pre-puberty marriage came into practice. Widow remarriage was prohibited. Husband was given the status of God for a woman. Education was totally denied to women. Custom of sati came increasingly prevalent. Parda system came into vogue and practice polygamy came into the tolerated. In economic field, women can to be regarded as a sort of property. She could be given away or loaned as an item of property. The Brahmanical law did not allow the property of rights of women, as the women lost her property rights. Women in Buddhism, the status of women improved during the Buddhist and Jain period, though there was no tremendous change. Finally, I conclude that in the Rigvedic age, women held important position in ancient India, but later Vedic period, medieval period, as well as modern Indian society, as elsewhere of world, the woman position is the mistreated. In ancient era, the Veda, Upanishad, and other scripture give a numerous example of women, philosophers, politicians, teachers, administrators, and saints. In modern age, all aspects of Indian male-dominated society, women were suffered by unequal social status with men. On our ancient era is the witness of this inequality. But we believe that one day has come in future when women once again be accorded respect and their rightful place in society. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Otoshi. Next speaker is Shilpa Joy. Shilpa Joy, Assistant Professor, Language and Literature, St. Joseph's College, Devagiri. You may please start now, Shilpa.
Yes, ma'am. Give me 1 second for me to share my presentation. Can you see my slides, ma'am?
Not yet.
Okay. Good
It is
afternoon.
coming, yes.
Yes, okay. Good afternoon. My paper is titled Revisioning the Women of the Ramayana Through Intersectionality and Dialogic Consciousness. So the following are my primary text. The first one is Voices from Kerala by Sarah Joseph, and it's translated from Malayalam by Vasanthi Shankaranarayanan. And the second text is The Liberation of Sita by Volga, translated from Telugu by T. Vijaykumar and C. Vijayshri. So both these primary texts are a collection of 5 short stories. Ramayana stories contains the following 5 short stories. That is Black Horse, which speaks the story of Manthara. Ashoka, that's about Sita. Mother Clan is about Shampuka's daughter, and Jadiguptan and Janagiguptan is about Rama and Sita. Again, the liberator of Sita. The first short story is The Reunion, that speaks about the story of Shurpanaka. The second one is Music of the Earth, speaks about Ahalya, about Renika. The liberated, that's a story of Urmila, and the shackled is a story of Rama. So the following are my objectives: to analyze the politics of rewriting the Ramayana through multiple marginal voices in Sarah Joseph's Ramayana stories and Volga's The Liberation of Sita, and how the of caste and larger institutions of society. To elaborate on how Sarah Joseph's and Volga's women question patriarchal concerns of chastity, fidelity, disability, and disfigurement, politics of caste and subalternity. To explore how various references to mythical female characters from the appropriation of mythic content serve to consolidate feminine experiences and sensibilities. So all these 10 short stories look into the following things: the revisioning notions of disability, that is very visible from the character Mandara in the Black Horse. Revisioning notions of bodily aesthetics is very visible in the character of Sita from the short story Ashoka. Revisioning notions of disfigurement can be seen through the characters of Shurpanaka and Ayumukhi in the short story Mother Clan. Revisioning notions of caste is visible through Shampuka's daughter, the story. And the short stories also subvert the notions of female chastity, as it is seen through the characters of Ahalya and Renuka through the following short stories of Music of the Earth and The Sandpot. Sarah Joseph and Volga portray feminine identities as non-essentialist, multi-dimensional, and complex. The following characters, which I've mentioned, cannot be explained by taking into account single categories like race, gender, caste, etc. And I quote Olen Hankiewicz, people can experience privilege and oppression simultaneously, and which is very evident through the character of Sita in the short story Ashoka. I caught Law being aware of and acting on the fact that different forms of prejudice are connected because they all stem from the same root of being other, different, or somehow secondary to the normal or ID. Olen Hankiewicz again says resistance and resilience is integral to intersectionality because these can disrupt power and oppression. Even from the so-called marginalized spaces and locations, oppressive values, norms, and practices can be challenged. So the women in both texts reclaim their voices silenced in the mythical past to voice out the continuum of women's oppression based on gender, caste, class, race, and sexuality. In the epic, Sita represents the voice of a socially constructed femininity, the voice of the above-mentioned female character, but are always related to the other voices within and outside the text. Thus, the emerging multi-voice narrative threatens or undermines the authoritarian language of the grand narrative. And these are my final observations. Sarah Joseph and Volga use revisioning as a strategy to subvert patriarchal structures embedded in mythical text, revisioning as a means to forge a vision of life in which liberation is autonomous and complete. And Sarah Joseph and Volga create a community of women by representing myths from alternative points of view and by networking women across ages and genders. strategies employed by both the authors give voice to female characters marginalized in the master narrative, extending the story of a character beyond its conventional closure, forging female bonds and creating a feminist collective. So these are my selected bibliography, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Shilpa. Next speaker is Shushmita Goswami, Assistant Professor, Department of Sanskrit, Lady Brabourne College. Shushmita. Shushmita, are you there? Shushmita, we can't hear you. You are there.
Ruvidi, am I audible?
Yes, now you are audible.
Okay. Thank you, Ruvidi. A very good afternoon to all. My topic is The Creative Genius, Gauri Dharmopal and Her Literary World, a brief study with special reference to gender equality. Gauri Dharmopal was a multifaceted writer, a brilliant scholar, and the first female priest of West Bengal and the former head of the Department of Sanskrit of Lady Brabourne College. But very few of us know about her contribution in the field of Sanskrit literature as well as in Bengali literature. She was not only an essayist, translator, poet, but a great children's author of Bengal. Most of her writings are in Bengali, and she was greatly influenced by Rabindranath, Swami Vivekananda, and Rishi Aurobindo. Gauri Dharmopal always depicts a thought about Indian life, society, history, culture, and philosophy through her writings. She was a progressive lady with a broad vision of life. In my paper, I will try to focus her ideas about gender equality, especially her thoughts about the harmonious coexistence of man and women through her writings. And I have chosen 3 pieces of literature for my paper. One is Malusri's Panchatantra, second is Puro Notun Vedic Bibaho, that is Ever New Vedic Wedding, and third one is a Sanskrit drama written called Janani. As you all know, Panchatantra is a collection of interrelated animal fables where we see Vishnu Sharma took the challenge to impart knowledge to the ignorant and dissolute sons of the King Amar Shakti, and Gauri Dharmopal translated the stories for children. It was regularly published as, in a famous Sandesh Potrika from 1961 with excellent illustration of Satyajit Ray. But she has made some changes in the stories and arranged it in a different way. In the main story, women were not always represented with dignified manner. Either they were deceitful or they are crude and quarrelsome. But Gauri Dharmopal rejected the stories which defame the woman's character. She introduced 2 characters named as Kilanjo Kinkini, who is the daughter of Vishnu Sharma and co-author with him, and she brings Malusri's character who rewrite the stories which are told to her by Boshu Shakti, the student of Vishnu Sharma. Gauri Dharmopal thinks that from the very beginning of childhood, the sense of respect towards women should be developed in children's mind, and so she named the stories as Malusri's Panchatantra. Now I'm going to take the second literature. Basically, it is a manual of Vedic marriage edited by her, and she was the first lady of West Bengal who acclaimed as a woman priest. Generally, we used to see a man to perform all the rituals of wedding ceremony, but a woman can do all the ritual as well. In her text, that is Puro Notun Vedic Bibaho, Ever New Vedic Wedding, we can see she has made some changes in the mantras where some negative adjectives were used to women. And she changes the words which are uttered at the time of the bride leaves her parental house after marriage. In that mantra, it is said that the bride leaves the father's house, but Gauri Dharmopal thinks that the bride is leaving the house of her parents. Both of her parents are equally precious to her, and so she changes the word from Pritibho to Matri Pritibhyam. And now we all know that Shampradhan, which is a very popular wedding ritual, and though Gauri Dharmopal strongly opposed this ritual, but she didn't ignore the popularity of this ritual in the society, and she offers a new way to perform the rituals. when in generally a mother cannot do the ritual of Sampradana, but Gauridi allows it. She said a mother can do the ritual of Sampradana. Generally, she explains the word Sampradhanam, I quote from her writings, the most significant gift of the marriage to the groom from the parents of the bride to be his life partner. And the groom should be accept her life partner with joy and love. The third piece of literature I have taken for my paper, it is a Sanskrit drama written by her, and it was enacted at Lady Brabourne College in 1984, though it is not yet published. It is called Janani. Janani is a story of a mother of a middle-class family of Kolkata. It depicts her day-to-day problems. In this drama, the family member of the lady always criticizes her for her every kind of shortfall of negligible mistake on her part. Finally, she protests and decides to leave, and then all the members of the family request her not to leave. And it is a simple story of family integration, linguistic integration, and national integration, and so on. And Janani means to her the mother of all language, that is Sanskrit, and the mother art. He had deep reverence for mother art. And she used to refer the last mantra of Rig Veda, which is an ideal example of equality and harmony. That is, Samani va ahuti, samana hridayani va, samana vastu mo mano jatha va susahasati. Let our aim be one and single. Let our hearts be joined as one, united be our thoughts, at peace with all. May we be together in harmony. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Rita.
Okay, thank you, Rubidi.
Now, is Sadaf Mustaq Nasti present now? Sadaf Mustaq Nasti? I don't think this presenter is present. So let me hand over the microphone now to Mona Lisa, because the next part of the paper presentation will be chaired by Professor Sanjukta Das, and over to Mona Lisa right now.
Thank you, Rubidi. The next round of paper presentations will be chaired by Professor Sanjukta Das, Professor and Head Department of English, Lady Brabourne College. Over to you, Sanjukta Di.
Thank you, Mona Lisa. Good afternoon, participants. This is going to be a long session because there are 11 presenters here. I'll quickly read out the names. I think you all are all here from what I can see, but I'll read it out again so you know your place in the sequence. Dr. Progya Ghatak, Orthita Bishwas, Dr. Shampa Das Mondol, Paroma Mukherjee, Sakshi Bhardwaj, Dr. Malini Mukherjee, Dr. Annesha Roy, Pooja Mishra, Dr. Navonita Mitra, Dr. Ishani Basu, and Vidushi Chordar. So I will now call upon another thing before I begin. Before you begin, rather, is an announcement that those of you who are interested in getting your papers published must submit a full paper for publication by 30th September latest. The papers will be sent for peer review. After that, the selected papers will be published in a volume. Now, having said that, may I now call upon Dr. Progya Ghatak, Assistant Professor of Anthropology, Government General Degree College, Shingur, to make her presentation. So,
thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Just wait a second. I'm just presenting my paper. Wait a second.
So your time starts now.
Good afternoon to all of you. A very good afternoon. So my topic of presentation is From Mother to Village to Disease Goddess, an anthropologist's study on Sapra tribe. So beginning, so my study, I have done my study on the Amdhok village, which is in the Bagda block of West Bengal, North 24 Pargana. So there is a small tribal community called Savara. So Savara is the generic tribal community. They are basically the forest dwelling community. They still follow the forest hunting, gathering, collection as their livelihood. They are mostly distributed in Andhra Pradesh, Bihar, Orissa, and West Bengal. And they have high mythical connection with the Lord Jagannath Puri. They claim that they are the first person who worship the Jagannath as a Nilmadhav form. They in West Bengal they have a mythical connection with the Kalketu, the hero of Mangal Kavya, like that. So we still found a lot of mythical connection with the Savara tribe. So let me begin. I'm just focusing on the Shitala cult, the worship they were following. So this is the worship called the Shitala cult, which is very much familiar in the Bengal, and we found this cult of practice is mostly found among the tribal rural community of West Bengal. It is not specifically in the West Bengal. We also found in various other states in the form of different ways, but the practice is very much prevalent in all over the India. So this is the three goddesses. One goddess is called, name is Baram, another is, the middle one is called Shitala, and the last one called the Yogini. So these all goddesses has a different roles and different functions. So let me begin. Focus of the goddess is the goddess Shitala. As we know, this goddess is typically totally different from the other goddess like Durga, Kali, or Lakshmi, Saraswati. Like she is the goddess who is riding on the ass, and having winnowing fan in her head, having broom in her hand, and having earthen features. So all these physical attributes has a very specific meanings, like the riding on the ass. This means that she represents the infertility aspect. She is carrying the broom. She is carrying the broom, which means the detoxification process, cleansing process, and rejuvenation process. The winnowing fan also function in the same level. The earthen feature, which has a meaning like that, she has a life-giving message to all the community, village, domestication, cattle, all the community. So she is the goddess who is not represented at the individual level. She is the goddess of household, at the village, the entire forest kingdom. So how this goddess has been transformed. As I mentioned, to demystifying the goddess, like the first form is Gorum, which is the protection of community, people, and locality. The second one is Chitula, which is basically specifically a smallpox goddesses, and she is also known as now the disease and welfare of children as well. And the last one is Yogini, which is the community gratitude and devotion goddess. So how she has been transformed, like my paper is the transformation from mother to village to disease goddess. So what I found, the goddesses associate with a range of attributes and function, of which the most important is the protection of the village, locality, or the family or entire kingdom which worship. She is a Janani because she gives birth to a cause, God, man, everything to be born. She is benevolent because personifies all good qualities of head and heart. She is malevolent because she has also been conceived in the background of fear and death caused by the main epidemic, war and strife. She has been conceived as a daughter, a young maiden, a bride, housewife, and affectionate mother. This aspect being celebrated in their folk tales like Shitala Mangal and Shitala Pala, in which the goddess, mother goddess, is represented in her graceful aspect as a young maiden, as a bride being wedded to a beloved, as an enormous wife of an equally husband, and also a real mother. The cult of Shitala is also associated with a particular type of impurity which causes smallpox. The disease in itself is process which symbolizes both the manifestation and outcome of impurities, and ultimately ends in purification and rejuvenation. So my observation is the growing concern for village protection, household protection, disease, children, and welfare of the community has included many forms of practices like worship of the village goddess, smallpox goddesses, and witch hunting, etc. The transformation of the goddess from fierce warrior to being mother and the daughter was a process whereby the deity was often elevated, humanized, and popularized. Sanskritization process has taken place at the domestic level. Like I said, this goddess physical attributes is like in household. She is a household deity, like in all tribal peoples. or at the same time in the village as well, they give a lot of importance when to mop, when to give the jharu, when to burn the light, when not to.
Your 5 minutes are up, so please wrap it up.
Yes. So Sanskritization process has taken place at the domestic level. The belief of the people in their spirits, demons have been interpreted in such a manner that the mother goddess has been during the passage of time from the position of a mother goddess. She has been transferred to village, to disease, to the child. They become closer to Sanskritized Hindu society and occupy stages in tribe caste continuum. The attempt has been made to draw the sacred genre of goddess Chitla from mother to village to disease, from method of transformation of worship and transition into nature to culture continuum. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Urchita Vishwas. She is a research scholar in sociology at Presidency University, Kolkata.
Thank you, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, so my title is From Tariq Pe Tarif to No Means No, Cinematic Rape Trials from Damini to Pink. Rape culture may be defined as a social environment which normalizes violent and usually sexualized behavior against women using misogynist languages, victim blaming, and slut shaming. Sylvia Wolby wrote that the media makes use of rape myths, which tends to blame the victim, shifting it from the perpetrators, and reduces the incident of rape to a rare event. Such a rare event occurs under special circumstances, such as if the victim goes out at night, drinks, smokes, or asks for it in any possible way, or the perpetrator is viewed as being deviant, mentally unstable, or solitary strangers. Media, with its continued display of sexual violence, sexual objectification of women, and the normalization of misogyny, contributes to the rape culture. The Indian film industry has reiterated the social and familial norms and beliefs of women as an object, as submissive, and the idea that it is only those who transgress such norms, that is, promiscuous women, get raped and harassed. Harassment and sexually approaching women is seen as the right of men. Many movies romanticize the idea of stalking, obsession, and touching without consent. Popular media reinforces the belief that rape is the ultimate harm that can be brought to the woman and the honor of her family. While many Bollywood films have shown scenes of violence against women, I will be addressing the cinematic representations of rape trials from the films Damini, which was released in 1993, and Pink, released in 2016. In Rajkumar Santoshi's Damini, the protagonist Damini is portrayed as being truthful and chaste and is married to an upper-class man, Shekhar. Damini therefore falls into the category of chaste woman or the perfect victim, rape charges laid by whom would likely to be believed true. However, Damini is not the rape victim in this movie, but rather the witness. Urmi, the maidservant, is raped by Damini's brother-in-law and his friends. Urmi is taken away from the household and dumped on the road. Shekhar later beats up his brother, thus proving that he is self-righteous. However, he does not help Damini, thus preserving the reputation of his family, which he judges as more important than seeking justice. Urmi, being a maidservant, can easily be seen as falling outside the definition of a chaste woman. Urmi is falsely accused of being a loose woman who grants sexual access in return for small favors. This bit of character assassination serves to undermine her allegations of rape by respectable and powerful men. The film then goes on to expose the corruptions of the social and legal system. The rape victim is paid no heed to and ultimately dies without receiving proper care. It is only when her lawyer, Govind, comes to her rescue that her case becomes stronger. Shekhar, eventually won over by the cause of justice and his wife's courage, comes to the stand as a primary witness and supports Damini's claims, and the judge finally rules in Urmi and Damini's favor. Aniruddha Roy Choudhury's Pink, released 23 years later after Damini, also deals with the problem of redressal of rape in law courts. The profile of the victims have, however, changed. Minal and her two roommates are working women living together in an urban space apart from their families, indulging in acts of smoking, drinking, engaging in romantic or sexual relationships outside marriage. Thus, they do not fall under the category of chaste woman or the perfect victims. Instead, these women transgress several patriarchal notions of appropriate behavior for women. These three women meet three men in a rock concert, which is followed by dinner and drinks. They go into a room to continue their conversations, where the men harass and molest them. Minal, not being able to control her rage and not giving in to the unwarranted sexual touches by Rajveer, the son of a wealthy businessman, breaks a bottle on his head. The assault is followed by threatening calls, hit and runs, and the rape of Minal by Rajveer's friends, reminding her of her place and limits. Deepak Sehgal, a retired advocate, offers his help and comes to their rescue. The courtroom trials follow almost the same trends as seen in Damini, except here it is the victim's claims which are directly being addressed. There is constant character assassination of the three victims by Rajveer's lawyers. The victims' claims are only validated when Deepak starts speaking and constructing the girl's safety manual by reprimanding the culprit sarcastically. Rajveer, in his final statement, utters the words, "These type of women deserve to be raped. Girls from good families do not behave in this way," thus reiterating the patriarchal norms of the society. Deepak wins the case with his ending argument of no means no. In these two films, certain themes become central. Number one, the culprits belong to a wealthy or influential family and will resort to any means to drop the charges or to prove them false. Number two, there is character assassination of the victims or anyone who speaks for them. Number three, the public trial is observed to be a multiple rape committed to the victim, as she has to describe every detail of the rape over and over again and relive her trauma. Number four, the claims of the victims only seem to hold ground when a man speaks for her or supports her claims. The legal system and the state are also patriarchal, guarding the chastity of the good woman and reprimanding the unchaste. As one may see in both films, as well as in individual and collective lived experiences, the legal space is deeply patriarchal, defining which cases are worth hearing. Since social institutions, whether familial, academic, or legal, protect and fail to punish powerful perpetrators, women, and often increasingly, turn to individuals.
You have crossed
Yes,
your
just last
time. Yes, just take a few seconds only.
Yes, women often and increasingly turn to informal, decentralized means of obtaining justice, as seen in movements of #MeToo and Lehman Shave. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next presenter is Dr. Shampa Das Mandol. She is Associate Professor of Philosophy at Mrinalini Dotto Mahavidyapith.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for the introduction.
Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. Before presenting my paper, I would like to thank the organizing committee of this wonderful workshop. And it's a pleasure for me to be here as part of this nice initiative. Let me share my screen. Sorry. What's happening? Why it's not coming? Okay.
Let's give her a minute. She'll rejoin probably. I'll wait till her 5 minutes are up and then we'll move on to the next speaker. She has already left, so don't know what's happening here. No, she hasn't left. She's here. She has become. She's muted. She's inaudible.
Would you like to call the next speaker till she
Yes,
gets
I
her
think that's
presentation
what we'll
ready?
do. Yes, Paroma, Shampa can get back later then. Paroma Mukherjee.
Yes,
She's
ma'am.
an-
Thank you, ma'am. Am I audible, ma'am?
From MPhil. Yes, it's Paroma, right?
Yes, ma'am. Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes, you are audible. Paroma is an MPhil scholar of history at Shohid Nojrul Islam Mahavidyalaya.
Thank you, ma'am. Good afternoon, respected chairperson and my fellow participants. My paper is entitled Women Education in the 19th Century Bengal and the Response to It. If we go back to the 19th century Bengal, we will find that women had to go through a tough time to cross the hurdles of blind faith and superstitions to promote education for them. At the beginning of the 19th century Bengal, there was a prejudice that women education was sinful and educated women were likely to be widowed early. There was a popular belief if a girl is taught to read and write, her husband will die soon after marriage, leading to her widowhood. Hence, it was believed that to lead a happy life, a girl should pray for her husband's long life instead of causing his death by getting educated. Thus, for girls to be married off by the age of 12 or 13, receiving education was often considered an anathema, sometimes even a sin. Education was considered dangerous not because it made woman manly, but because it drew her away from her traditional role. Worse still, men held an extremely poor opinion of women, maintaining that women were devoid of intellectual abilities and could never be educated. In the early 19th century in Bengal, women remained busy in looking after their children and doing other household chores, reluctant to keep contact with the outside world. By the first quarter of the 19th century, quite a few people like Dwarakanath Tagore, Prasanna Kumar Tagore, and even Radhakanta Dev, the great leader of the Orthodox Hindu, became convinced that women should be given education. The belief that education as a precondition and the first step towards women modernization was common to all reformers from Ram Mohan to Vidyasagar and to the radical young Bengals. The idea that education would spoil the womanly qualities in women and bring disgrace on their families was gradually disappearing. Thus, this was the beginning of an era when cross-sections of the Bengali men became aware of the need to educate and emancipate their women. Thus, the conservatives and the progressives alike believed that educated mothers would improve the physical health and mental vigor of the future generation of the Bengali Bhadras. However, a debate regarding the syllabus of the women education emerged. The conservative people of the society thought that the excessive pressure on education would be harmful to women. The basic ideas of reading, writing, and a minimum knowledge of arithmetic, hygiene, and embroidery should be sufficient. It was the opinion of Dwarakanath Ganguly, Shebnath Shastri, and other radical Brahmo leaders that as men and women were equal, so there was no need for separate syllabus for them. But more conservative leaders of the Brahmo movement were, however, in favor of the restricted study for women. The reason for their anxiety being, after getting education, women would not maintain their families properly and they would not give proper time in the household work. However, it is more important to note the attitude of women regarding their own education, which was changing slowly but steadily. As a matter of fact, they were more conservative in their own outlook earlier as regards education. The belief that education would cause widowhood was very popular among the women themselves. They also maintained that the educated woman would become unchaste, disobedient to in-laws and husbands. However, this situation changed with the passage of time. As female education spread and female seclusion became less vigorous, an increased number of women began participating in social activities outside the context of the family. As soon as the propagation of women education began, there emerged, quote unquote, new women. These new women started to raise their voices against the control of the males and the struggle for their self-respect. The minds of these imprisoned women now started to open to a world wider than the restricted domestic life. Thus, after getting the privilege of education, the new women began to realize their limitations and their boundaries and thus raised their voices against their exploitations. Women now started to grow as individual personalities. Education facilitated modernization and social change and led to the formation of a new social attitude towards educated women. The traditional prejudice of women not venturing out of their homes started vanishing, and the presence in employment received acceptance in society. Thank you.
Please unmute yourself, Sanjukta.
Sakshi, I will call upon Sakshi Bhardwaj.
Sorry to intervene. Sanjukta, I think Shampa is ready. If you could.
No, Shampa is ready. I told her in the message box that I'll call her at the end of this session.
Okay.
I'm going by the sequence. And may I call now Sakshi Bhardwaj, Research Scholar of English at Vanasthali Vidyapeeth.
Yes. Thank you so much, ma'am. The title for my paper presentation is Gender Dynamics in Temsula O's Memoir, Once Upon a Life, Burnt Curry and Bloody Rags. Ma'am, am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay. Role of women in society has always been gender driven, but this role never come easy for any woman. Woman has always been seen in relation to some, be it a daughter, mother, sister, or wife, or any other relationship. And her role in these relationships has never been an easy one either. How often we forget that women are an individual too. Their struggles through life are not as easy as they seem. They face the discrimination since their birth in this culturally patriarchal driven society. One such story of struggle and hope is Temsula O's memoir, Once Upon a Life, Burnt Curry and Bloody Rags. Temsula is an Indian poet, short story writer, and anthropographer from Nagaland. She retired as a professor of English at Northeastern Hill University, where she taught since 1975. She received Padam Shri in 1997. Now, when we hear about such women of stature, we often think of her achievement and success, but the struggle and difficulties behind this success left unnoticed. The memoir of Temsula O is full of such struggle. The two major consuming acts of her childhood are enjoying a ball made by mixing burnt rice and leftover curry at her hostel and learning how to tie rags to her crotch and wash them with stone when she starts menstruating. Now, Once Upon a Life can be read as a feminist memoir. After losing both her parents in quick succession, Temsula O is packed off to a boarding school where she realizes soon enough that her only hope at having some success at life is to ensure that she gets a good education. The travails of hostel life are well documented, but the education provided by missionary school proves to be very useful later in her life. She documents the stigma attached to menstruation and female hygiene in her memoir. After a struggleful childhood, she was married to a man her father has chosen at the age of 9 from their clan. Now, she was not interested in the marriage. She wanted more from life even after getting married, but the demands of patriarchal system comes in the way. Even after that, she finds a way to continue her studies. It was a loveless marriage, but she lived it through gracefully. Temsula is a powerful voice in Northeast. Her novels, her short stories, her poetry portrays the plight of women in her region very appropriately, and her life in itself was not that easy one. Temsula gave a valuable lesson from her life story that education and financial independence are the only two ways through which a woman in society can find a voice. It was her education which gave her the courage to work, and it was her financial independence that gave her the wings to work further and to study further. Temsula's presentation of her life story is through the lens of her experiences emotionally as well as practically. Her memory retains incidents from her childhood. Mainly, she named the chapter of her memoir as father, mother, brother, boarding school, marriage, and as a writer. It tells a lot about Temsula as a person. Her struggle of life is an inspiration to many women out there in the world. She said, and I quote, "It is the ordinariness that challenges us and pits us against enormous odds." Women in the world are now telling their own story, and my paper constitutes such story of an extraordinary poet and writer, Temsula's journey in the patriarchal world. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sakshi? May I call Dr. Malini Mukherjee, Faculty, Women's Studies Department, Lady Brabourne College, to make her presentation now.
Thank you, ma'am. Just presenting my screen. I hope it's visible.
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
The title of my paper is Traversing the Realities of Poverty and Precarities from the Ontology of the Marginalized Women Workers of Pachla area, West Bengal. Based on the empiricism of home-based piece rate women workers of Pachla area of our own Bengal, the given paper aims at unfolding the perceptions of the subjects on their lives, that is, on the causes of their poverty, vulnerabilities, and livelihood crisis. It pivots around chronicling their own versions of realities and decoding their own cognitive and emotive meta-narratives. The theoretical foundation of the paper is laid on Robert Chambers' book titled Whose Reality Counts. The methodology is based on a very subjective own account deliberation, which actually goes against the normative quantitative scalar measurements of perception. The threefold observations are found on the causalities of poverty, precarities, and vulnerabilities by the so-called marginalized women. First is the individual causes, second is the structural, and the final is the fatalist causes. The individual cause for the poverty and vulnerabilities as edged out by the so-called marginalized women workers. This argument concentrates on individual failings or inadequacies. Here, the poverties and precarities of life is taken as a sort of pathological state where the poor, so-called economically marginalized women are blamed for their own vulnerabilities. I have listed down 35 individual traits, some of which are a deep-seated feeling of helplessness, dependency, marginality, powerlessness, living each day as it's come with no future savings, a deep-seated sense of dejection. These traits are actually passed on intergenerationally. Professor Oscar Lewitt's theories on culture of poverty elaborates on these traits. The structural causes. These perspectives explains a person's poverty as a result of outsider or environmental factors such as the employment factors, education, lack of welfare policies, market forces. In the given study, it is shown that despite the provisions of free schooling and Kanyashri by the given government, there is a high dependence on private tuition, which actually makes the education, the quality of education extremely problematic. Second, about the healthcare schemes, it's found that though there are a number of hospitals and emerging medical personnel, but there's too much of the resource that is present over there is not up to the mark. There's a high sense of dependency on the quack. The pathological tests and the diagnostic centers run by the government are not up to the mark. There's a presence of too much of skepticism about the governmental training programs and also about the efficacies of self-help groups. A significant gap is found between the state provision of the development programs and what the true subjects accounts for them. And the most important factor is about the market structure of the piece rate workers. The piece rate workers of Pachla points out that the market structure is extremely hegemonic. It is with the layers of middlemen or ostagas, as they locally call them, and the women workers from the bottom tier of them, they earn a pittance. They are extremely underpaid. The third and the foremost account of them is fatalism. The fatalist perspective views poverties and precarities as a result of some unforeseen circumstances, such as bad luck or misfortune that is normally beyond an individual's control, is defined by the law. With this mindset, the subaltern women blames their fate for poverty and they believe their fate to be invincible. There is a strong sense of religious belief among all the responses. There are two types of fatalist belief. One is the cosmological fatalism, which believes on karma, cosmic forces, divine predestination, cycles of birth, and structural fatalism. Both of them are prevalent in the given account. There's a deep conviction in the transformative power of religion, be it the follower of Hindu or Islamic religion. The study groups pointed out on believing in some types of religious rituals, like fasting, reading of scripture, so on. In fact, one of the significant facts is that the women happen to be the central figures of austerity who observe all the religious ethos for the well-being of their household. Fatalism and its concomitant religious belief, according to the so-called subaltern women, gives them the hope the strength and the power to tide over their everyday miseries and their uncertain tomorrows. Towards a new epistemological journey. On the final note, I would like to say that is how the so-called poor and the doubly or maybe the triply marginalized subaltern women make sense of the ways of their life. How they get normalized with this diabolic sense of vulnerability is in fact a key aspect of bottom-up approach to poverty discourse. A visible gap is found in the manner in which these people, these women, I would be more precise, depicts and describes their everyday realities, and how the populist discourse and the mainstream academia theorizes on their lives. We need to bridge this gap for a more further, fruitful epistemological journey. Thank you.
Thank you. Next presenter is Dr. Annesha Roy, Assistant Professor of History, Women's Christian College.
Thank you, ma'am. Good afternoon, everyone. The title of my presentation is Voice of the Suppressed, the Story of Cornelia Sorabji. Cornelia Sorabji was a pathfinder at a time when there was strong racial and gender biases in the colonial professional world. She was the first female graduate from the Bombay University, the first Indian woman to study at any British university. She was, in fact, the first woman to study law at the prestigious Oxford University, and she was one of the first female advocates in India. Born in Nasik in 1866, Cornelia was one of the 9 children of Reverend Sorabji Karsetji, a Parsi turned Christian, and Francina Ford, a social worker and a prominent proto-feminist figure who helped establish various schools in Pune. Cornelia's family adhered to Parsi cultural practices, though they followed Christian faith and spoke Gujarati. After attending local missionary schools, Cornelia was the first woman admitted to the Deccan College, Pune. She studied literature and secured first-class first position in the final examination. This entitled her to a government scholarship to study in England. However, since she was a woman, she was denied this prize. Subsequently, a few prominent English women in Pune and Bombay raised funds to send her to Oxford. Cornelia thus went to Oxford in 1889 and joined the Somerville College there. At Oxford, Cornelia studied law, and in 1892, she became the first woman to pass Bachelor of Civil Law (BCL) examination. But Oxford would not grant her the degree, as no woman till then was allowed to register as advocate. She was awarded after many years in early 1920s. Cornelia returned to India in 1894. From the outset, Cornelia Sorabji's legal work focused on matters relating to women. She also possessed Bombay University's LLB examination in 1897. However, despite several attempts, she was prevented from operating as a wakil, as the accepted notion of the Indian legal system at that time was that women did not have anything to do with the law. In 1904, Sorabji entered the colonial bureaucracy as the lady advisor to the Court of Wards of Bengal. By 1907, she was working in the provinces of Bengal, Bihar, Odisha, and Assam to represent women and minorities in provincial courts. Her role was to protect the interest of the Parda Noshim, or women of Hindu households who lived under Parda or seclusion in the male-dominated world. In 1909, Cornelia was awarded the Kaiser-i-Hind Medal for her efforts to reform the plight of women and also for her undeterred opposition to orthodox Hindu attitudes towards child marriage and widows. In 1924, when the legal profession was opened to women, Cornelia began practicing in Calcutta High Court. But due to a largely patriarchal legal system, she was confined to preparing arguments and opinions on cases in absentia and was not allowed to plead cases in person before the courts. She was denied access to the bar library. She was often subjected to gender abuse and cases of false harassment. Outside court, Cornelia Sorabji was involved in many social reform activities. She was a great votary for abolition of child marriages and sati practice. She had a strong commitment to the cause of gender equality. She gave up her practice
Lisa,
in...
your time is up. Please wrap up.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So in the conclusion, I just discussed the political view of Sorabji. To some extent, she had a conservative political outlook. In contrast to the rising tide of Indian nationalism, she supported the British Raj in India. She believed that India should continue to be under British rule to counter Hindu dominance. Her views resulted in her marginalization from the mainstream of Indian political, social, and professional life. But her legacy should continue to live on because she was a champion of women's rights and contributed significantly to change the course of history. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Next presenter is Pooja Mishra, Research Scholar at the Hindi Department of Presidency College, Presidency University, Kolkata.
थैंक यू मैम. थैंक यू. इस ऑनलाइन मंच पे सभी को मेरा नमस्कार. मेरा जो विषय है वो है हिंदी साहित्य. यस मैम.
यस पूजा.
हाँ, मेरा जो विषय है वो हिंदी साहित्य की विद्रोही लेखिका कृष्णा सोबती. हिंदी साहित्य में कृष्णा सोबती को एक विद्रोही लेखिका के रूप में देखा जाता है क्योंकि उन्होंने हिंदी साहित्य में ऐसी चीजों को, ऐसे विषयों को चुना जिनको अभी तक यहाँ पे एक टैबू समझा जाता था. अब ये जो विषय थे वो 60s के, जब 1960s के दौर में लिख रही थी, तो ये जो विषय थे वो फीमेल सेक्सुअलिटी से भी जुड़े हुए थे. ये किसी फीमेल रेप विक्टिम के मनोवैज्ञानिक अध्ययन पे भी जुड़े हुए थे. ये हिंदी भाषा की विविधता पर भी जुड़े हुए थे और एक स्त्री का आत्मनिर्भर रहते हुए विवाह संस्था से बाहर भी खुद की पहचान स्थापित करना, इससे भी जुड़े हुए थे. उनके कुछ उपन्यास हैं, मित्रों मरजानी, समय सरगम, यारों के यार, ए लड़की, दिलो दानिश. इन सारे उपन्यासों में उन्होंने ऐसी बातें रखी हैं जिन पे हिंदी साहित्य में कोई बात नहीं कर रहा था और जो थोड़ा ट्रेंड से हटती थी. तो उनका जो 1960 में उपन्यास आया था मित्रों मरजानी में एक पंजाब के कस्बे के एक छोटे से कस्बे के एक परिवार में दिखाया गया है डॉटर इन लॉ, वो किस तरह से जब अपने हस्बैंड से वो फिजिकली कंटेंट फील नहीं कर रही है, जो सेक्सुअल डिजायर, वो कैसे एक्सप्रेस करती है. वो घर के सामने भी वो सबको बोल सकती है कि ये चीज मेरी पूरी नहीं हो पा रही है. इसके बाद उनका 1972 के समय जो उनका उपन्यास आया सूरजमुखी अंधेरे के, इसमें जो नायिका रतिका है ये बचपन में ही बलात्कार का शिकार है. तो लेकिन इसमें इस कैरेक्टर को उन्होंने एक सहानुभूति की सिंपैथी गेन करने के लिए कैरेक्टर बनाने के बजाय उन्होंने ऐसे बताया है कि उसका एक मनोवैज्ञानिक अध्ययन किया है किस तरह से वो डिप्रेशन से वो जो उसके इमोशंस होते हैं, वो उसकी जो संवेदनाएं होती हैं कैसे फ्रीज हो जाती हैं और इस फ्रिजिडनेस से वो कैसे निकलने की कोशिश करती है, ये उसकी क्या जद्दोजहद है, इस पे उन्होंने बात रखी है. इसके बाद जो उनका उपन्यास दिलो दानिश आता है, इसमें विडो पे बहुत सारी बात हुई है, विधवा जीवन पे. तो उसमें जो एक कैरेक्टर है छुन्ना बीबी, जो एक बहुत बड़ी सामंतवादी परिवार है, उसमें वो बोलती है कि क्या कहते हैं कि क्यों मुझे किसी भी ऑस्पिशियस काम में मुझे बाहर कर दिया जाता है और मुझे अलग समझा जाता है, जब भी मुझे सही कपड़े पहनने की इजाजत नहीं है, कलरफुल कपड़े पहनने की इजाजत नहीं. इन पे वो क्वेश्चन करती है. उनका जो उपन्यास है समय सरगम है, ए लड़की है, इसमें वो ये दिखाती है कि कैसे जो लड़कियां हैं जो वो इस अपना जो बाहर निकल रही है उस चीज से कि कैसे वो अपनी फैमिली के भीतर मतलब ये नहीं देखती हैं कि मतलब एक मुझे विवाह से ही मेरी पहचान बन सकती है. विवाह संस्था के बाहर वो जाके ये देखती हैं कि वो उसके बिना भी आत्मनिर्भर हो सकती है और अपनी एक पहचान स्थापित कर सकती है। इसके बाद जो उनका दूसरा विद्रोही तेवर सामने आता है उनकी भाषा को लेके। उनकी भाषा में वे कहती हैं कि जब उनका जो पहला उपन्यास था चन्ना, सिर्फ वो अपनी भाषा के साथ कोई कॉम्प्रोमाइज करना नहीं आता। हिंदी कृष्णा सोक्ती खुद पंजाबी क्षेत्र से आती हैं और जो उनकी भाषा है वो पंजाबी का पुट लिए रहती है। तो जब हिंदी साहित्य पे इस पे ऑब्जेक्शन उठाया गया कि क्यों हिंदी को शुद्ध हिंदी नहीं रहने दिया जा रहा है, हम ऐसी रचनाएं क्यों एक्सेप्ट कर रहे हैं, इसकी वजह से उनका जो पहला उपन्यास था चन्ना, उसको वो आखिर में प्रकाशित करा पाई। वो उनके डेथ बेड पे थी तब वो प्रकाशित हुआ, लेकिन उन्होंने अपनी भाषा से समझौता नहीं किया। उनका जो उपन्यास था, इसके बाद जो उनका एक माइलस्टोन इसके लिए उन्हें साहित्य अकादमी में मिला था, जिंदगी नामा में भी जो विभाजन के पहले जो पंजाब है, पंजाब का जो पूरा रूरल एरिया है, वहां का एक जीवन दिखाया गया है और उसमें बहुत सारे पंजाबी और पाकिस्तानी शब्दों, मतलब उर्दू के शब्दों की भरमार है। इस पे हिंदी के वरिष्ठ साहित्यकार ने उन्हें बहुत सुझाव दिया था कि आपने अगर इसे शुद्ध हिंदी में लिखा होता तो ये ज्यादा पाठकों तक पहुंच सकता था। पर उनका कहना था कि मुझे ये लगता है कि हम जिस चीज से भाग रहे हैं वो है कि हम हिंदी की शुद्धता के पीछे भागे जा रहे हैं, जबकि हमें लगता है कि हम इसमें ज्यादा से ज्यादा डायलेक्ट, हम यहाँ की बोलियों को जितना इसे इंक्लूसिव बनाएंगे हिंदी को, वो ज्यादा जरूरी है, बजाय इसके कि हम उसकी शुद्धता की वजह से उसको आम जन की पहुंच से दूर कर दें। तो ये उनका बात ये था। और
समय खत्म हो चुका है, काइंडली रैप इट अप।
हाँ, बस मैं ये कंक्लूड कर दे रही हूँ। तो इस तरह से जब हम कृष्णा सोक्ती को देखते हैं तो हम ये कह सकते हैं कि उन्होंने हिंदी साहित्य में कुछ ऐसी परंपराओं को तोड़ा जो ऐसे विमेन राइटर अपने आप को ऐसे स्थापित किया जो उन्होंने लीग से हटने की कोशिश की और एक ट्रेंड को तोड़ते हुए उन्होंने प्रगतिशील विचारों को हिंदी साहित्य में स्थान दिया। धन्यवाद मैम, इस मंच पर अवसर देने के लिए बहुत आभार और धन्यवाद। थैंक यू मैम।
थैंक यू। नेक्स्ट स्पीकर इज डॉक्टर नवनीता मित्रो, असिस्टेंट प्रोफेसर हिस्ट्री, विमेन्स क्रिश्चियन कॉलेज।
Thank you, ma'am. My paper is titled All the World's a Stage, Voicing Protest Through Pandavani. Oral narrative traditions, epics and folklore included, survive at the intersection of the past and the present, wherein their variations and the conflicts they represent signify the conflicts in societies which produce them. The difference between history and literature often gets blurred in the bardic tradition, with oral tradition constituting an important tool of written history, which gradually evolve as a credible story presented with literary skill. Memory, history, and imagination therefore become inseparable, wherein the difference between the oral and the written exists primarily in the act of creating a document. Oral accounts, which mainly developed with the purpose of recording histories from below, is in fact gradually becoming indispensable to the writing of feminist, labor, Dalit, and tribal histories. According to Natalie Zeman Davis, Dalit and tribal histories form narratives of the oppressed that survive the onslaught of hegemony by moving into the oral domain. During the 1970s, with oral history emerging as a tool of anti-establishment history, the oral and the visual began revolutionizing doing history in our age. In fact, the institutionalization of history separated an ideal history based on a systematic, rational, and scientific pursuit of the past from a history of the present based on lived experience, memory, traditions, folklore, and emotions. Being the product of a dialogue in which speaking, listening, and silences happen over time, oral traditions, being extant, have thus a pivotal role to play in the reconstruction of the past, thereby helping in the construction of an alternative identity for the subaltern. Rooted in tradition, the Mahabharata, for example, constitutes a site which, while portraying contemporary issues, epitomizes the struggles of quite a few brave hearts from amongst marginalized Indian communities who have had to fight off poverty, illiteracy, gender discrimination, and casteist bias so as to respond to their true calling. Hailing from the Pardi scheduled tribe of Chhattisgarh, Tijan Bai is arguably the foremost amongst them all, whose name has been synonymous with Pandavani, the traditional art form of narrating folk tales from the Mahabharata that is popular amongst India's indigenous populace. Tijan's bold and pioneering attempt to perform the hitherto male-dominated Kapalika form of Pandavani as against the usual Vedamati style practiced by unlettered tribal or Harijan women drove her to break gender stereotypes. Equipped with her festooned tambura as her only prop and her musical troupe in tow, this exceptional balladeer has been enthralling audiences the world over by transforming the legendary heroes of her narrations to easily identifiable real-life characters. An epic like the Mahabharata gets a new life every
Your
time.
time is up. Could you please wrap
Okay,
up?
okay, ma'am. Yes, okay. I'll just go on to my conclusion. Tijan's unique folk art form, her sensuous rendering of the epic, her rustic charm, her uninhibited candor, and her naive simplicity has made her stand out as the diva of Pandavani, who will always be remembered as the most enigmatic voice of the Mahabharata. A driven artist with an exceptionally sensitive mind, Tijan has been transforming herself into a character of the world of legends, far surpassing her contemporary male Pandavani singers, even while she makes all the world her stage. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Ishani Boshu, Assistant Professor, English, Noor Muhammad Smriti Mahavidyalaya.
Hello, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, I will. A very good evening to everyone present, and I would like to present my screen. Is it visible?
Yes, it's come.
You can see the presentation, right?
Yes, yes, please begin.
Yes, ma'am. So the title of my presentation is The Non-Conforming Woman in Han Kang's novel, The Vegetarian. And it's about the journey of a woman, a very ordinary woman, and how she becomes extraordinary by the actions that unfold in the novel, how she makes some decisions and how the outcomes shape for her in her own family. So this woman who is the protagonist, Young Hye, she is usually silent and reclusive and is married to her husband, who is becoming increasingly estranged from her. And suddenly, one night, she has a nightmare about meat and blood all around her, which surprises and frightens her so much that she decides to renounce meat altogether and becomes a vegetarian overnight. This decision of hers breeds very negative reaction from her own family members. Her husband objects to it, tries to reason with her, but nothing avails. And due to their worsening relationships, things sort of spiral out, and he forces himself on her on a regular basis. And even her own family Young-hae's own family arranges an intervention to force-feed her meat, to which Young-hae objects, and she is abused by her father in front of everyone present, all of her family members, and even her husband, and she attempts suicide. She is rushed to the hospital and put in intensive care. Her condition is not well, and her husband decides to forsake her because he feels to live with an unstable wife would be detrimental for his own life and his own career. So Young-hae is at the mercy of her family members, mostly her sister, who takes up her care, and she moves in with them. Now, interestingly, Young-hae and her husband's relationship was rather strained because her husband always found her unattractive and ordinary, while the brother-in-law, the sister's husband, finds her attractive and is sort of lusting for her. And he somehow...
Ishani, you have a few
Yes,
seconds,
ma'am.
about 30 seconds. You have about 30 seconds left, so please hurry it up, okay?
But I just started. Okay, then I'll just sum up. So we see that after being subjected to marital rape and incestuous relationship from her husband and her brother-in-law, she her mental health deteriorates, and still she refuses to bow down to authoritarian figures like the doctor or her husband and her father, and attempts suicide and revolts against them. She renounces food and clothes and all human contact as a sort of protest, and tries to, I mean, it is a delusion, but she sort of tries to metamorphose into a tree, believing herself to be a tree, much like the metamorphosis we see in Ovid's stories about Philomela and Daphne, or even Ahalya in our Ramayana. So we see how vegetarianism or veganism becomes a protest mechanism for an oppressed woman like Young-hae, and how she uses this as a tool to protest against the society that she is pitted against. Okay. So is the time up, ma'am?
It's past time. Thank you, Ishani. Vidushi Sardar, Assistant Professor, History, Dr. Kanhailal Bhattacharya College, will make her presentation, and after which Dr. Shampa Das Mandal will make the last presentation of the day. Vidushi
Yes, ma'am.
Sardar.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Very good evening to respected chairperson, organizer, and my co-participant. Ma'am, shall I present my paper in Bengali?
Yes, of course.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Title of my paper is পাশ্চাত্য চিকিৎসা চর্চায় বাঙালি নারী প্রসঙ্গ জহুরা কাজী বেগম, or জহুরা বেগম কাজী। যে বিষয়টা নিয়ে আমি আজকে বলতে চাই সেটা মূলত পাশ্চাত্য চিকিৎসা চর্চায় মুসলিম মেয়েরা কিভাবে আসছে, কতটা পরে আসছে, এবং ডাক্তার হওয়ার পরে তারা সমাজকে কিভাবে সার্ভ করছে। মোটামুটি ভাবে 1835-এ যখন ক্যালকাটা মেডিকেল কলেজ প্রতিষ্ঠিত হচ্ছে, সে সময় কিন্তু মেয়েদের সেখানে কোনো জায়গা আমরা দেখতে পাচ্ছি না। রাদার টু সে, মেয়েরা পাশ্চাত্য চিকিৎসা বিদ্যা চর্চায় আসতে দূরে থাক, তারা প্রাতিষ্ঠানিক শিক্ষার ক্ষেত্রে আসছে অনেকটা পরে। সেই কারণে 1871 খ্রিস্টাব্দে ক্যালকাটা মেডিকেল কলেজ থেকে একটা ইনিশিয়েটিভ নেওয়া হচ্ছে যাতে প্রসূতির মৃত্যুর হার কমানোর জন্য যারা সেই সময়ে গ্রামীণ ধাত্রী তাদেরকে তার প্রশিক্ষণ দেওয়া যায়, এবং সেটার জন্য 1871 সালে প্রথমবার ক্যালকাটা মেডিকেল কলেজে ধাত্রীদের ট্রেন করার একটা কোর্স চালু করা হচ্ছে। এবং 1871 সাল মানে ক্যালকাটা মেডিকেল কলেজ প্রতিষ্ঠা হওয়ার প্রায় 36 বছর পর। তারপরে তার আরো অনেকটা পরে 1884 গিয়ে মেয়েদের কলকাতা মেডিকেল কলেজে ভর্তি হওয়ার পারমিশন দেওয়া হচ্ছে, এবং সেখানে কাদম্বিনী গাঙ্গুলি প্রথম স্টুডেন্ট হিসেবে তিনি ভর্তি হচ্ছেন। এবং কাদম্বিনী গাঙ্গুলির কথা মোটামুটি ভাবে আমরা সবাই কিন্তু এখন জানি, এবং ভেরি রিসেন্ট একটা সিরিয়ালে হচ্ছে যেটা ওয়েল নোন টু মোস্ট অফ আস, সেটা হচ্ছে প্রথমা কাদম্বিনী। এবং কাদম্বিনী গাঙ্গুলি 1884 কলকাতা মেডিকেল কলেজে প্রতিষ্ঠা হওয়ার পরের বছর আরো দুজন ওই মেডিকেল কলেজ থেকে পাশ করেন। তারা হলেন কুমারী বিধুমুখী বসু, শ্রীমতী ভার্জিনিয়া মেরি মিটার। আমি এদের নামগুলো এই কারণেই বলছি, আমরা যে সময়কালের কথাটা বলছি সেটা হচ্ছে সেকেন্ড হাফ অফ 19th সেঞ্চুরি। এই সময় কিন্তু কোথাও আমরা ডাক্তারি ক্ষেত্রে বা ডাক্তারি পড়তে আসা মুসলিম মেয়েদের দেখতে পাচ্ছি না। এবং যখন আমরা মুসলিম মেয়েদের এডুকেশন নিয়ে কথা বলি বা যখন শিক্ষা ক্ষেত্রে মুসলিম মেয়েদের নিয়ে কথা বলি বা হিন্দু মুসলিম মেয়েদের কম্পারিজনে আসি, তখন কিন্তু সবসময় আমরা দেখি যে মুসলিম মেয়েরা অনেকটা পিছিয়ে আছে রাদার দ্যান হিন্দু। তার বেসিক কারণটা হচ্ছে মুসলিম সমাজের ওই রক্ষণশীল মনোভাব, কিন্তু আরো পরবর্তীকালে তারা এই ক্ষেত্রে আস্তে আস্তে করে অগ্রণী ভূমিকা নিয়েছিল। এবং অনেকটা পরে আফটার ফার্স্ট হাফ অফ 20th সেঞ্চুরিতে আমরা দেখছি একজন মুসলিম নারী ডাক্তার, তার নাম যেমন আমি টাইটেলে বললাম টাইটেলে জহুরা বেগম কাজী। তিনি 1935-এ তার ডাক্তারি ডিগ্রি লাভ করছেন। সেটা কলকাতার কোনো মেডিকেল কলেজ থেকে নয়, দিল্লির লেডি হার্ডিঞ্জ মেডিকেল কলেজ থেকে। কিন্তু তিনি সেই পরীক্ষায় ফার্স্ট হচ্ছেন এবং তাকে ভাইস রয় অ্যাওয়ার্ড দেওয়া হচ্ছে, কেন কি তিনি স্টুডেন্ট হিসেবে এত ভালো ছিলেন। এই কথাগুলো এখানে উল্লেখ করার একটাই উদ্দেশ্য, যদি আমি হিন্দু এবং মুসলিম উভয় সমাজকে কম্পেয়ার করি তাহলে ক্যালকাটা মেডিকেল কলেজ প্রতিষ্ঠা হচ্ছে 1835-এ এবং ফার্স্ট মুসলিম ফিমেল ডক্টর আমরা পাচ্ছি 100 বছর পরে 1935-এ। শুধু সেটা নয়, এই যে 1935-এ একজন মুসলিম ফিমেল ডক্টরের উল্লেখ আমরা বিভিন্ন টেক্সটে পাচ্ছি, তখন কিন্তু অবিভক্ত বাংলা। এবং অ্যাট প্রেজেন্ট আমরা কিন্তু মেয়েদের নিয়ে অনেক কাজ করছি, কিন্তু কোথাও এই মুসলিম মেয়েদের কথাটা একদমই হারিয়ে যাচ্ছে, যারা সেই সময়ে এরাও কিন্তু সমাজকে লিড করেছিলেন। এবং মানে বাংলা ভাগ হয়ে যাওয়ার সত্ত্বেও কিন্তু অবিভক্ত বাংলায় এই ধরনের মেয়েদের অনেক রোল রয়েছে। এই মানে জহুরা বেগম কাজী, এদের নিয়ে সেভাবে কোনো কাজ হয়নি বা আমরা কোনোভাবে কিন্তু এদেরকে নিয়ে আলাদাভাবে গবেষণা করছি না। সামহাও কোথাও আমরা হয়তো এদেরকে হারিয়ে ফেলছি। সেই জন্যই আজকে আমার পেপারটাতে এটা উল্লেখ করার এটাই উদ্দেশ্য ছিল, যে যেখানে আমরা কাদম্বিনী গাঙ্গুলিকে নিয়ে এত কথা বলছি বা আমরা চেষ্টা করছি সেই সময় 19 শতাব্দীতে ফিমেল ডক্টরদের খুঁজে বার করতে, আমরা কিন্তু কোথাও এই মুসলিম মেয়েদেরকে হারিয়ে ফেলছি বা সেই সময় সেই ইতিহাসটাকে আমরা কেউ খুঁজছি না।
সময়সীমা পার হয়ে গেছে।
থ্যাংক ইউ ম্যাম।
ওকে, our next speaker is Dr. Shampa Das Mondol, whose screen presentation will now begin.
Yeah, thank you so much, ma'am, for giving me another chance. Okay, the title of my paper is Writing to My Future Self on Being Enlightened. It's basically a story of a woman on her enlightenment. She goes down the memory lane after being awakened and discovers the factors that led her to spend a totally dissatisfied life. She's writing a letter to her future self to narrate the story. Hello, dear. Today I'm so happy to be with you. Do you know why? I could save some of the precious years of my life. Now, at this moment, I'm in a position to say that I have an abundant life. No, I had everything to sustain my life. In fact, more than I needed. However, one thing was totally missing, and that is my happiness. You know what? For so many years, I was so engrossed in a particular set pattern of my life that I didn't even question myself for once. Am I happy with it? I thought that's how it is. I was programmed that way. I was wrong. Anyway, I'm not at all ashamed to say that the pandemic came to my life as a blessing in disguise. By the grace of the Almighty, I got that calling. One fine morning, out of nowhere, someone whispered in my ears with a soft nudge, "Hey, what are you doing? Indulge yourself in some sort of soul searching. No more putting others first. You deserve more." Having expressed my gratitude silently, I hit the road for self-discovery. On that journey, my first agenda was to dismantle that intense and radical confusion about who I am at the core. It took long to retrieve myself from the deep crevices of my life, as large parts of myself stayed submerged for decades. But I'm happy for my win. It's always better late than never. After so many years, I'm really amazed to see the better version of myself, much more liberated than before. I'm so happy to have you, a brand new life. The best part is, I'm no longer living someone else's life. I'm no longer happy, apparently, from outside. Now it's real. I'm happy from within. I put off the mask of super competence and achievement that created my outer persona for decades. My life is no more based on a false foundation, no more erosion. It's a no. If I need to do something at the cost of my physical health, emotional freedom, and spiritual awareness. Would you like to know the main factors that prevented me to meet you much before? Here I go. It was my misaligned childhood, where young girls are trained to fit in a rigid prescription early in life. The picture others have of us becomes our own picture. Denial, or rather silencing the inner self, overarching patriarchy, personal as well as cultural conditioning, social validation, manic compulsion to be perfect, limiting belief structures, and many more. Anyway, I'm happy that I could turn my pain into power, embracing the truth. Now, I'm fully present, whole, and free. I'm coming to meet you to celebrate my win. Thank you so much. for being there with me.
Thank you, Shampa. And there have been a lot of interesting papers today, and I'm sure you are bursting with questions, but we have reached the end of our 5:30 limit with the technical support team, and I'm sure now that you have a WhatsApp group, you all can carry this discussion on your own before you submit your papers. You can kind of question and recharge your papers, re-edit or remake your papers. But I've put out 2 notices in the WhatsApp group. Please have a look at them. One is regarding your surnames, one is regarding the submission of paper. We'll soon send you some instructions regarding the format for the written paper submission. Thank you all very much. It was very interesting.